Back in the mailbag on this Mailbag Monday. A lot of questions about Danilo Gallinari, who suffered a knee injury over the weekend. Plus, what would a good Celtics season really look like? And questions about the format of this podcast. It's all right now on the Locked On Celtics podcast.
Be ever ready. Recognize the city of champs. Boston, baby, we do what you can't. Locked on number 18, Tatum and Brown, J-team, step back. We gon' wet that and slay teams. Of course, the Celtics, who else could it be? Screaming like KG with the Larry O.B. Karalis above average, assessing the team status. Best daily pod, no cap, salary matching. Clutch like Bird the DJ, keep John on replay. Prime time, dapping up the truth on the sideline. Raining J's, how it started, raising banners, how we finished. Locked on Celtics pod, home of the winners. B.
Hey, welcome back to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Thank you so much for making this show part of your regular routine. I am here for you 3 days a week for now, 5 days a week pretty soon. So all of the people who have been saying, I miss 5 days a week, it's coming. It's coming. I'm just taking a minor kind of step back as we all across the Locked On Podcast Network go down to 3 days a week, except Locked On NBA, which continues to be 5 days a week. But we're all taking a little step back in the depths of this offseason so we can get a little bit of a breather. But it's still here for you 3 days a week, still part of your regular routine. So get this fresh, free podcast wherever you get your podcast. It's on YouTube as well. You can watch the show there, subscribe, and all of that stuff. I'm John Karalis. I cover the Celtics for Boston Sports Journal. I'm heading into my 16th season covering the Celtics. It just sounds like so many years when I say it out loud. I've also written a book called The Boston Celtics All-Time All-Stars. So check that out. Today, mailbag questions. Later on, questions. I saved the third segment for like more fun stuff. So people ask about the podcast, and something that's actually come up a lot is the structure, the commercial breaks, and why so many ads. I'll talk about that. I'll answer that question. That'll be later on in the third segment. In the second segment, I'll get into what an actual good season will look like for the Celtics. But let's start with what the topic would have been today if I didn't do a mailbag. A few questions coming in, starting with Vincent, who said, did you see Galinari injured his knee playing for Italy? If it's a major issue, what do you think the Celtics will do? Micah said, is this knee injury to Galinari similar to that of Robert Williams before the playoffs last year? Will he have to make the decision to shave the torn piece off the meniscus, an 8-week recovery, or repair it, 16-week recovery, assuming it isn't a bucket handle tear of the meniscus? And then Marcel, in light of the Galinari injury news, what would it take for the Celtics to grab Bojan Bogdanovic from the Jazz? Would you be interested in such a move? So let's just take them all in order. I did see it. It looked bad. I am actually very happy that it is only a meniscus tear. It's easy for me to say I didn't suffer the meniscus tear, but the injury is a lot better than what it could have been as far as ligament tears, ACL, MCL, anything like that. So the meniscus is something that you can deal with. And especially now it's August, we're getting close to the season, but he'll certainly, I think, miss training camp. I don't expect him to be back for the preseason, even if it's a minor thing. I haven't seen the extent of it. So this is the next question that we're going to be looking for. How serious a meniscus tear is this? Is it something that can be just surgically repaired by, like Micah said, shaving a piece off? Or does it have to be repaired and go through a much longer recovery process? If you just shave it off, then, you can say 8-week recovery. Let's give him 10. Let's give him 2 full months and plus a little bit. So all of September, all of October, you get into November, he doesn't miss a lot of time in that scenario. Get him back by mid-November. You can start working him in little bit by little bit. The adage of season doesn't really start till Christmas. Well, you can get him acclimated in time for Christmas and it should be fine. Not a big deal. Lucky break there for everybody involved. If it's an extended thing, and I'm not going to go on the low end of recovery for him because he's a little older. I'm going to go on the higher end for recovery. So if it's 16 weeks, Well, 4 months, 5 months. Let's extend that out a little bit. So now we're going all of September, October, November, December, January. We're looking at about the All-Star break. That changes the dynamic a little bit for the Celtics. What does that mean for the team? What do they do? Addressing Marcel's question, they may go out and get somebody. If he's going to come back this season, they won't get a hardship exception. They will just have to deal with it, and he'll come back. And whenever he comes back and he's healthy, he'll rejoin the team. To get somebody like specifically Bogdanovich, well, Bojan Bogdanovich makes $19.3 million. So that's out because to get him would cost a lot. And as far as players and what I'm sure Bogdanovich is available, but the Celtics just don't have the types of contracts necessary to trade for Bogdanovich. As far as, I mean, they could do it, but the players that they're going to be giving up, it's not going to be an equal trade. So it's not worth it to get Bogdanovich. He doesn't fit into any traded player exception. There's just no way to get him. So he's out. The Celtics would have to find somebody that fits into one of the TPEs, so you can get up to $7 million if you want. But I think for now, the first thing is, and let me answer Micah's question directly. This is exactly what happened to Robert Williams. This is the exact same injury. Now, the severity of the injury, I don't know if it's how severe it is. Rob, as we know, had a piece shaved and was able to come back rather quickly. I don't know if that's going to be the case for Danilo. So if Galinari has the least severe injury, he could be back soon enough. Not a big deal. He'll be back in November. If he has the most severe injury, he can miss a significant amount of time. And that opens things up for other players on the team. Maybe it's Sam Hauser. Maybe Hauser has to get a little more time. Maybe you go a little heavier Kabengele. Maybe you just have to lean into Luke Kornet a little bit more. Maybe you go out and you find somebody and you have to just deal with the extra expense, knowing, as you know, if you're Rick Grossbeck, knowing that, hey, these types of things happen, and you have to be prepared for in an emergency to potentially spend more money because you want to win a championship. Now's not the time to get cheap. If Galinari is out for a while, then you have to go find some way to fill that hole somehow. And maybe it's already on this team. Maybe somebody's already on this team. Maybe Vonleh makes the team now and steps up or whatever. So there are a lot of different ways this can go. First and foremost, we have to find out the severity of the meniscus tear. And if it's something that can be just shaved and he can be back soon, great. Bullet dodged. The team will be very happy to have that be the news at this point. And you deal with it until, Thanksgiving or something. If it goes beyond that, then you have to see what the options are. Maybe you deal with it with two-way guys. Maybe JD Davison gets a shot and you just go smaller. I doubt that. That's probably a last resort, but hey, who knows? But you can't go out and get one of these big money guys. As much as I'd love to see Bogdanovich on the team, that's just not somebody that you're going to be able to get. So that's the guy that's the Danilo Gallinari use. It looked so much worse than it actually was. When I first saw it, I was like, well, there he goes. Hospital Celtics still in effect, but they are they may have come out of this actually okay. So we'll have more. I'll write more on Boston Sports Journal about Galinari on Monday, and we'll try to get some of those details, and we'll try to figure out what's next for him, what's next for the team. For now, it's not as bad as it could have been. Now we just have to see how much they got away with something here. Oh, and my last thing is, Don't be one of those people who just says, oh, why is he playing for Italy? He's playing for the Celtics. Don't do that. This is a sanctioned international event. Giannis is out there playing for Greece. Jokic is playing for Serbia, and these guys are out there playing for their home countries. This means a lot. These things mean a lot. And I believe this Eurobasket was in Italy, right? This was going to be the whole tournament was going to be. Didn't Galinari say it's going to be in his hometown? Like, of course he wanted to play in that. Of course he did. This is probably devastating for him. I'm willing to bet that he would rather play in that than win an NBA championship. That's how much this means to these guys. So I'm not really, or at least he equates it pretty closely, and it just means a lot. So it's something that's super important. And just because we don't understand it in America, it's a huge deal. And this is part of the deal that you make. These guys get to play overseas, and you hope that they come out of it okay. And he didn't, and now you just hope for the best. Up next, what's a good season look like for the Boston Celtics? I'll talk about that after I get to you this message about driving impaired. Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? What's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. Truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, that's fine, but just don't get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. Make Locked On NBA your second listen every day as we cover the league in full 5 days a week on Locked On NBA. I host on Wednesdays with Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans. We have a great time. It's a fun way to look at the NBA. So check it out. Get it wherever you get Locked On Celtics, free, available everywhere. It's on YouTube as well. And of course, it's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Let's get to Patrick here as we dive back into the mailbag. Mailbag questions, by the way, can go to johnkaralis.com/mailbag. johnkaralis.com/mailbag. That is the only way I'm answering questions. I know people like to ask the questions in a lot of other places, but for my own ability to keep things in check, in order, and easily available for me so I can get to as many of these questions as I can, it's johnkaralis.com/mailbag. I'm doing this so I can help you get your question on here, even though I haven't gotten to all of the questions. I sometimes combine a few of the questions. Sometimes I feel like I've answered some of these questions on podcasts. So make sure you're listening to all of the podcasts as well, because sometimes your question has been answered already. So johnkaralis.com/mailbag, which is where Patrick went. And I know you missed the 5 days a week, Patrick. But Patrick asked, could you talk about what a good season would look like for the Celtics this year? Could you contrast that with how the Celtics could potentially relapse and come out looking like the first half of the 2021 season? Maybe give us what you think the chances are of that happening. So what's a good season? I like this question partly because I have come to believe that it's not about the final numbers. It's not about a 50-win season is a good season. A 55-win season is a better season. A 45-win season would be a terrible season. I don't know. I don't know what the final number is, right? We know what the benchmarks are. You get to 50 games and you're a good team. You get the every win above 50 is a better and better like version of a great team. So can they get to 55? Can they get to 60? What's a good season look like? Honestly, it looks like the Celtics being on board from the beginning. It looks like the Celtics playing an unselfish brand of basketball where the isolation is significantly minimized, where the ball is popping, where passes are being made, where guys are cutting, where, okay, sometimes you have to play some ISO ball. We get it. It's the NBA. You can't eliminate ISO ball, but it's okay sometimes, but not all the time. Are the Celtics defending at a high level? Are the Celtics playing for each other? That's what a good season looks like. I've just really come to believe that it's more about, I don't want to go full like Kaizen process over results because that's, Sam Packard's MO. That's his thing. But it's true, though. It is true that I do believe in good process does give you good results. And I definitely used to be, you got to win this many games to be this, but it's not about that because there's so many factors outside of that. What if Brooklyn is together and KD is just, he puts everything aside and Kyrie is present and Ben Simmons somehow becomes awesome and he buys in. And what if Brooklyn is so damn good that you're like, well, what I used to believe that 55 wins or 60 wins in a 1 seed is a good season and anything less would be a disappointment. Well, Brooklyn is too damn good right now. What if Milwaukee is too damn good and the Celtics play great basketball, but they end up the 3rd seed? It's still a good season. If you can look at the end and say, you know what? They had a few stinkers and they had a few that they probably should have lost, but they won. So those will balance out. Did I generally feel like they played really good basketball? Did I generally feel like you come out of a game and be like, well, they lost, but man, they really worked their asses off. That's fine. Did they win and not give up too many leads? That type of stuff. If you can get to the end of the season and feel like that, then you'll have a good season because everything will take care of itself after that. The ball will be popping. So a lot of assists, that means a lot of easy baskets, a lot of transition baskets. If the defense is playing up to its capabilities, then you'll have a top 1, 2, 3 defense. That will lead to a lot of positive results. So does that mean 55 wins? Does it mean 60? Does it mean 52? So many external factors that will weigh into that. But if you can say, man, these guys are playing hard. If you generally, you'll get the sense by people on social media, especially, but you get that feeling of, you know what? I like this team. If you can, if it's January and people are saying, whatever's been going on in the season, I don't care. I like this. I like this team. Then that's a good season because that means the team is playing the brand of basketball it should be playing. And if it's playing the brand of basketball it should be playing, if these guys are playing the right brand of basketball, then the 1, 2, or 3 seed, that will just come organically. The wins will just come organically. The accolades, the all-star berths, the all-NBA stuff, that's all just going to happen organically. It's all about, can you play the right way? Can you make the right plays? Can you do it on both ends? Can you be consistent? Can you bring the energy more often than not? Can you not blow leads and all of that stuff? Now, the second half of his question, where it's like, how can the Celtics potentially relapse? Well, that would be, first of all, it'd be horribly disappointing because everybody on this team knows they don't want to relapse, but it would be another Tatum slow start. It might involve another injury. It might involve some a recurrence of the turnovers and stuff like that. It might be a little too much ISO play. That you know how it looks. Yeah, you all know how it looks. If you're listening to this podcast on August 29th and you're still listening to Celtics podcast on August 29th, you know what crappy Celtics basketball looks like because you've seen it. I think we can all just revel in one, I think, indisputable fact that no matter what happens, we all know with these guys what good basketball looks like and what bad basketball looks like. And when they're playing bad, I think everybody can look at it and be like, oh, here we go. Okay, this is bad Celtics. This is going to take whatever. They're going to have to pull this game out somehow, but it's bad Celtics basketball. I think we can all recognize that pretty quickly. So can they relapse? Of course they can. Short turnaround, maybe, a little bit of a slower start, a little bit more sluggishness. I can see some of that, but this is where being young comes in. A lot of people use that excuse during the season. I think this is where it really comes in. I don't buy it as much during the season because guys are tired. You get tired. That happens. But the short turnaround, which affects a lot of teams, and it's not easy, but being young, the quicker recovery is where youth comes in. Being 25, you can recover that little bit quicker. So I think they can maybe navigate this a little bit easier. That's my hope anyway. Inigo asks, last year, Grant made a huge leap. Do you think Sam Hauser and Luke Kornet can become rotation players next season? What do you expect from them? If they could play 10 minutes per game, it would be terrific. Well, I think Luke Kornet can actually do that. And I'm certainly taking a positive kind of a look at, I'm certainly being optimistic when it comes to Luke Kornet. If the Celtics feel that they can start the season with Luke Kornet and they're not making some desperate push for Hassan Whiteside or Dwight Howard or DeMarcus Cousins, those guys are all available. Any one of them would sign with the Celtics, I think, right now, if anybody offered them a contract. But if the Celtics, Ime, Brad, the coaches, the rest of the coaches, the rest of the front office, if they're saying, you know what, let's I think Luke can handle this. Let's see. Then I'm willing to give these guys the benefit of the doubt. But I think they've earned it. I think Brad Stevens has earned it. I think Ime Udoka has earned it. At least if you think it's hey, let's see, then all right, let's see. Same thing with Sam Hauser. The Celtics made a very quick move to lock up Sam Hauser on a guaranteed deal. You hear Grant Williams talk about Sam Hauser as a knockdown, like dead-eye shooter. I mean, this dude must never miss in practice. These guys talk about him like he's, Steph Curry. But again, I'm willing to give, when you earn the benefit of the doubt, if you've done enough, if you've done your job well enough, where there's a question and I'm like, I don't know about this. Well, if I'm on the fence and you've done your job so well, so quickly, like Brad has and Ime has, so you know what? I'm not gonna step on this. I'm on the fence. I'm not sure, but I'll give you that. I'll say, fine. If you think Luke can, let's give it a shot. All right, give it a shot. Sam Hauser, if he can give it, okay. You really buying into that? All right, let's see. Hauser can be a real great catch and shoot guy. He really could be. And that's what the Celtics need. A catch and shoot guy. He's got some size, defensive limitations for sure, but maybe he can work through that. Maybe he's gotten to a point where the Celtics feel good about that. So can they become rotation players next season? Sure. What do I expect from them? Not a whole hell of a lot right now. Not a lot. I expect that. 10 minutes. 10 minutes a game from Luke Kornet, I think, is fine. It really is fine. What's he going to do in 10 minutes? He's not going to, I don't think he's going to kill you in 10 minutes. And if he does, then you go a different direction. But I think him and Sam, I think they'll be fine. And maybe I think Sam Hauser might get some opportunities right away. And if he makes the most of them, then you have, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Sure. Especially with Galinari out, that could work. But I'm keeping it all fluid. I'm optimistic because the team has given me reason to be optimistic. But for now, they could be. We really need to get into preseason so we can get a closer look. Let's take a second here. I'll come back. We'll talk about Jaylen Brown and his next contract, the best Celtics team ever, and a question about how we approach this podcast. People want to know about advertising. I'll answer that question next. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Celtics your first listen every day. It's your team every day here in the Locked On Podcast Network. And we're diving back into the mailbag, wrapping up the show here with a question from Ra with some possible hurt feelings. Any chance that either JB or the Celtics consider a no trade in JB's next deal? It's interesting. I don't think that will be the case because that generally doesn't happen. If he makes a an all NBA team before then and he gets a supermax deal, I think the Celtics can say, look, that's essentially a no trade because we're not going to trade you if you're an all NBA player. Like we're not going to do that. His name pops up and whatever, but I don't think a no trade clause is necessary in his next deal. And I don't think Jaylen would care to ask for that. Maybe he does. But I just because contracts in the NBA generally don't include that unless you're way up at the top of the food chain. There are obviously exceptions, but I don't think that'll be there. Finn asks, what Celtics team do you think is the best Celtics team ever? Well, I'm partial to the 86 Celtics. Now, there are going to be people who say there are teams in the 60s that are certainly more capable of winning. And I know I was lucky enough to talk to Tommy Heinsohn. If you scroll way back to a couple of summers ago, I had Tommy Heinsohn on the podcast, and he made a strong argument for his teams in the 60s that ran, and they had Bill Russell and obviously Tommy, and they had Cousy and Sam Jones and KC Jones defensively, and they had a Hall of Fame, an entire Hall of Fame roster. I'm partial to the 86 team because obviously at that point I was 13 years old. I was able to watch the 86 team. And you had Larry Bird at his absolute height, doing everything. That team with, it had McHale and Parrish and DJ and Danny Ainge shooting and Bill Walton off the bench. And it was just, I think that 86 team is one of the best basketball teams ever put together. So that's my answer. That's my answer. To answer directly Finn's question, I think the 86 Celtics is the absolute best Celtics team ever. But I know people in the from the 60s who will tell you, no, we could beat that 86 team. I don't think so. I don't think they were good enough, but they also had Bill Russell, and especially right now, I don't know if I ever want to doubt Bill Russell. So it's close. One of those Bill Russell teams in the streak could have been better, but I'm going 86. I just partial to that. All right. Frank asks a question that I get sometimes, and because I don't want to shy away from questions like this, Frank says, hey, John, big fan of the podcast. Thank you, Frank. Been listening since the Rain and Jays days, which is the very beginning, me and Jay King, before we joined Locked On, before anything. That was me and Jay, and that was a lot of fun. So Frank says, it's not a dig, but I'm wondering if the amount of advertising on the podcast has increased over the years. Lately, I find myself forwarding through more and more ad breaks to get to your analysis. I get there's a revenue stream there, but I'm wondering if you feel that the podcast has too many commercial breaks. So yes, there's more ad space now than there ever has been. But I will say that we limit the ads to 2 per break. So I'll pull back the curtain here. I just read an ad from the NHTSA, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So they are doing an outreach, and they bought some ad space. I read a 30-second ad, and then I have a digital insert where another ad fires a pre-recorded something or other. And then when I just took another break, I didn't have anything to read, so I had 2 digital inserts. On a day where I have 2 ad reads, like I just read them live, no digital inserts. So it's only going to be 2. Now, I admit, sometimes I take a few liberties with the ad reads, and I go a little longer. So it's supposed to be a 2-minute break. which I think is kind of the standard. Everybody can sit through a 2-minute break, 2 commercials, a minute apiece. That's kind of, if you're watching YouTube TV or Hulu or something like that, and they do an ad break, I'm sure I have Hulu. I have the Hulu with the ads. I'm trying to watch like Always Sunny, or I'm catching up on the Welcome to Wrexham. And the ad break's like 4.5 minutes. So I get frustration with the ads. However, I will say this. The show is free. So part of getting the show for free and part of me doing this as my job, this is what pays me, is I'm offering you this content, but other entities, Built Bar, Rock Auto, BetOnline, pay us to, sell you advertising. And so what I ask is, you can fast forward through it if you want. I can't stop you, but what I hope is, and hand up, I know I got to be better about not making a 60-second ad read into a 2.5-minute ad read. Like, that's something that I know I have to be better at that sometimes, because you don't want to sit through a 4-minute ad break, just like I don't want to sit through that 4-minute ad break on Hulu. So I know I have to be better about that, but it's 2 commercials per break. That's our limit. That's what we try to do. Try to keep it tight. We try not to go overboard. And frankly, this is what keeps me doing the podcast. I'm able to do the podcast, and it's worth it to me because the advertisers pay me. They pay me a salary. Or not a salary. Like, I get paid to do this job. This is my job. So I understand. I totally understand. Frank, you're not the only person who has raised this concern. It's something that has come up before. Oftentimes, it's my own fault for going too long on the reads. If you haven't been able to tell, I like to talk. I don't mind talking. I'm sitting here. I'm talking to you, but I'm also sitting by myself in front of this camera, talking. I escape into a little world when I'm in this little bubble here with the camera and the lights and the background and all that stuff. I don't feel like I'm sitting alone in a studio talking to just a camera. I'm actually talking to you, Frank. Like, I do bring myself to that spot, and sometimes I get carried away. There's no doubt about that. I get carried away. So are there too many commercial breaks? I think the network has done a very good job of trying to limit it. We are trying our best to sell the ads and pay people for the work that they're doing, but also understanding that you have a listening experience that we are conscious of. And so I will try to do better on my ad reads and all of that, and not make it seem like there's 20 ads. It's just 2 per break. So thank you, Frank. And I hope that I'm happy to pull back the curtain on the podcast and let you know how it works, because I think that makes you you feel more connected to what I'm doing. I do this podcast for you. I get paid for it. It's a nice living, but I do this for you to give you the content. And I don't want to make it seem like you're inconvenienced or the show is ruined by anything. But I also do ask for a little bit of leeway, because this is how I get paid. This is how I do my job. And this is how I, pay my bills and pay my living expenses and all of that stuff. So thank you again for the question, Frank. Heather, we'll wrap it up with this. Have you ever thought about getting Nick Kyrgios on the podcast? Mega Celtics fan, handy tennis player, Greek heritage, and best of all, an Aussie. I haven't actually thought about that. Don't think he's exactly easy to get on the podcast, but I don't know. Maybe he's a listener. I can't say that he's not. He's a big Celtics fan. Lots of people in Australia listen to the Locked On Celtics podcast. Maybe he's So, Nick, if you're listening, my brother is a much bigger tennis fan than I am. I would get my brother on to get you on the podcast, but Yeah, I would love to have that. Any other professional athlete, huge Celtics fan, I would love to have him on the podcast. Why not? But let's see what kind of work we can put into that. This hasn't been a guest-driven podcast. It's not like Low Post or something like that. It's a lot of guests. It's not easy for me to get guests, and we're doing 5 days a week normally, so it's just a lot of reaction and analysis and stuff like that. But every once in a while, I do like to get some guests. So, hey, if I can get a big one, then I'll get a big one for you. All right. Thank you for the questions. Again, johnkaralis.com/mailbag, johnkaralis.com/mailbag. To ask a question, any question you want about the Celtics, about the NBA, about the podcast, about me, whatever. Like, let's have some fun with it. I like to save the third segment here for some fun questions in the offseason. Mailbags do tend to drift and become less frequent as the season comes up and there's game after game after game and analysis. So then that tends to go away a little bit, but I still will answer questions and hopefully in the analysis of these games, answer some of the questions that you're asking kind of organically. So thank you for doing that. Subscribe to the podcast. If you're still listening at this point and you're not subscribed, hopefully this means that, hey, you like the podcast and you will subscribe. You can also subscribe to the show on YouTube. And there's a whole process with YouTube. I want you to hit that bell so you get notified when the podcast video drops. You can comment. You can give it a thumbs up. The thumbs up in the comments really drive the algorithm so it pushes out to other people. But again, pulling back the curtain, half the watches on the podcast on YouTube come from non-subscribers. So the people who do watch and subscribe, if you comment and give the thumbs up and everything, that pushes it out into the suggested videos because YouTube is all about sucking people down wormholes and rabbit holes. So let's get some Celtics people down into that Celtics rabbit hole with the Locked On Celtics podcast by liking and thumbs up and commenting and all of that stuff. And of course, sharing the podcast would be the best thing. Tell everybody, tell your friends, family, everyone that they should be listening to and watching the Locked On Celtics podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.